In for Baccarat, and that goes in! Hugo Baccarat gives Flint City a 3-2. Buckley, the ball falls to Buckley. One-on-one with Etheridge. What a save!
Welcome into the first ever MSN All-State Media Day for girls soccer. Jonathan Turner alongside Dan Stickrett.
Ball comes in, a good head! 1-0! Shot, another save from Etheridge! Rebound, and it goes in the back of the net. The Bulldogs up 1-0! Burzma, but then for Vlasma! 3-0! Stewart Heights with a shot! Upper 90 and in!
Effectively today here on the Michigan Soccer Network, we are launching our new division of player recruitment videos.
Mario Canoe now finds Sock. Finds Sock's got a left-footed banger. He shoots it! It's in! The Red Hawks equalize!
All right, and welcome back here into the UPSL Recap Show. Jonathan Turner alongside Santiago Almeida. And first off, Santiago, how you doing, man?
Been good, man. Like busy as always with our teams in the States and whatnot, and obviously following all the stuff's going on here in the Midwest. But honestly, good, just busy.
Busy is the word of the day. A lot of busyness going on here at MSN. We're excited about a lot of really cool things, new shows, new things coming our way here in the very near future. But we're talking UPSL Midwest East here today, as we've been doing here throughout much of this season. We had a hiatus there for about a week or so, but we're back at this. And, you know, as we look atop the table again here in the league, Detroit United now has slotted their way into the number one spot. They have played 6 games. They're undefeated. They're 4-2, and they lead the way just by 1 point right now between them and Duca.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it last time, but it's one of those teams that they've had the same kind of guys over and over, year in, year out. And once they find a bit of form, those guys, they're leading the league in goals too. They tend to never slow down, and I think they're kind of preparing for a long run this year in the playoffs. So it'll be good to see, you know, if they can keep that momentum going. I think they got a couple of tougher games coming up as well. And they did tie the last game as well against Detroit City. So, which to me, I thought they were going to win that one. Detroit City having a tough start to the season, but I think when the weekend itself, coming off that Memorial Day weekend too, there was like a big Albanian tournament that they held. And I think a lot of their guys were either there or away on vacation. As I think a lot of these results probably had some sort of bearing on that too. So, yeah, kind of a weird one. But I think Detroit United, in my opinion, will likely keep that momentum going. They're still, I think, the only team that's undefeated. The next closest actually has 2 losses. So I think Drita is the team with the second best record in 4th place. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that going.
That's right. So, you know, question I have as we get ready to dive into this, and we've talked about it a little bit, I think, before, either on or off camera, but I want to dive back into it. You know, if you look at the Midwest East division for what it is there a team, you know, we talked about maybe being Duca or even Drita during this because they're newcomers to the league and they've seen some success here in the early going. But you know, the summer is a different animal than that of the fall. Right. We talk about that a lot. It's different, right? A lot of your teams in the summer are made up of college athletes who are going to return to their college campuses here in late July or early July, depending upon what school you go to. Detroit United is not one of those teams that relies heavily on college players. They're just not. They are, and we talk about that. So if there's a team in the Midwest East that's really set up for the long haul of a run going through the summer, it would be, in fact, Detroit United. And again, I don't know a lot about the Drita and the Ducas to know what their makeup is, but being that they're newcomers, my guess would be that they have a lot of different variations of their roster, and only time will tell what they would look like as far as their longevity. But the spring summer time, when you start talking about national championship and going to a long playoff run, you know, Detroit United is as far as in my opinion, is the only team that would probably be set up to try to do that in this season, right? I'm not talking about later seasons, but if you look at this year, this spring season, is there another team that could make that run into, hey, get past, that regional round and into the round of 16, could they do that?
It's funny because I had a call with I had actually had a call with Benny Tatai last night from Detroit United, and we were talking about like his ambitions, and he said he's going on vacation to the Euros, so he's really hoping to finish top 2, so he can get that bye and not have to play that midweek game because he's flying back on the Friday. But I think a lot of the teams, I actually just added a little tab there because I wanted to know the way I calculate people's records is based on because sometimes with games played, it's always different. So I look at points lost, not necessarily points gained, because then it gives you an idea of like the picture of how many possible points they can get. And it gives you a good idea of how many, like who's really doing well. So if you look at the top 5 teams, Detroit United has lost 4 points because they have 2 ties. So that means they could have picked up another 4 points. Duca and Pass Pro and United Stars have dropped 8 points between the 3 of them. So they're on the same note. But if you look at Drita, they've only dropped 6. They have 2 losses, 0 ties. So I think any of those 4 teams that are between 2 and 5 are still kind of in the picture because, again, it really takes, like Detroit United loses 1 game, they lose 3 points. And if they lose to any of those top teams, those guys gain back that pace on them, right? So let's say Detroit United loses, who do they have coming up? Let's say Detroit United, for example, loses one of their last games of the season. Then all of a sudden, one of those teams like Pass Pro or Duca could really take advantage of something like that, especially Drita, because they haven't necessarily tied any games. Because ties, I always say ties are the worst. In some ways, they're good if you're one of like the bottom teams. But if you're challenging for a title, if you're tying games, it kind of kills your momentum, and it also loses points for both teams. So, for example, our team, we played against Syracuse FC 2 weeks ago, tied them 1-1. They tied us late, and then last week we tied against FCY, which is the champions last year. We tied them 4-4. So instead of looking at it as like 2 points gained, I look at that as 2 points lost for us, but also 2 points lost for those teams. So because our team is kind of fighting to be in those playoff spots, for us, it doesn't really matter. But because those teams at the top end, like the FCYs who are looking to win the league again, them tying that game, and they got tied on like the 94th minute, or we tied it super late, it kind of kills them because they lost those 2 points, and later in the season, those 2 points make a huge difference. So I don't think especially this division, I don't think it's wrapped up in any way. I think there's still a couple of exciting games. Like this Sunday, for example, Detroit United plays Pass Pro. So that's a 1v3 game. It's away at Pass Pro, so it's a pretty tough game because they got to travel to Grand Rapids, and we all know like Pass Pro tends to win a lot at home because the travel is definitely plays into their favor, and I can empathize with that. So it'll be interesting to see. Like I think any of these teams in the top 5 definitely still have a shot, and then there's also another race for that 6th playoff spot because if you look at points lost there too, 6th place has lost 12 points, 10th place has lost 11 points. So that means that the gap there is not very big. So there's still an opportunity for any of those teams to still make up enough ground to finish in the top 6 and make it to the playoffs. So it's pretty open-ended. When you look at this from like a statistical perspective like this, those numbers are very, very interesting to look at.
So, and the reason I ask this question is I often ask this question when I was coaching high school, at Birmingham Groves. We knew that, if we wanted to win a state championship, we were going to have to go through some pretty good teams, right? Either in the districts, regionals, whatever. We knew that there was going to be battle games that we were going to have to battle in that we probably on 9 out of 10 times we would lose, right? And I would ask this question of coaches, like, well, how do we win these games, right? And at the end of the day, it was one of those things where, like, you know what, it's got to be a lot of things that go right for you in that game, in order for you to win. And when I look at the champions that have come out of the UPSL the last number of years, right? We look at, Chiriaco in the fall, right? They won the UPSL national final out of California. We saw, in the spring, we saw a team out of Florida, a brand new side out of Florida that won it in the spring of last year. And again, it was really, really kind of a cool thing. They were made up of a bunch of really, really good younger players not your not your typical UPSL winning or championship team, right? You look at teams like Chicago Nation, who've been to a national final a couple times. They're made up of players again that are long-standing players on the roster, a good makeup of 7 to 8 players that are just really good players, right? So my question back to this, the reason I'm asking this question is to win the Midwest East, to come out of that. Detroit United's been doing that consistently for the last decade. You've got, Hamtramck made their way out this past fall. And they lost to Columbus Crew, a team made of MLS Academy Next, U19s type players. How does Midwest East go further? What can they learn from the past to get them into the quarterfinals, which I don't think we've ever seen a team make it to the quarterfinals from the Midwest East?
Yeah, I think we talked about this before, but using that example of that team from Buffalo, they made it into the quarterfinals last year. It's the team we played last Saturday. And the one thing that I did like about their run last year is that it was the same, like it's still the same team. Like we've played these guys 3 years in a row, and I think it's the same guys we've played every single year. But the first year we beat them twice, first and last game of the season. And then last year they just destroyed us. Like it wasn't even close. Like we were down 3-0 at half. The guy scored a bicycle kick in the first half to make it 3-0, took his jersey off. Like it was like one of the most like outplayed games we've ever had. But then we go and play them this year. They have a similar team, but then it's just not as, they're not getting the same kind of results. So I think what they did that year, it's all momentum. And what I always say, especially when it comes to playoffs, our team has never won a playoff game. We've made playoffs every season, but we've never won a game. And I always said we have a good team, but winning that first game, in my opinion, is way harder than winning the next. Because that first semifinal win, once you have the momentum and you know that you can win one game, then winning another one is not an issue. But it's winning your first playoff game and getting out of there. And that's what Detroit United is really good at, is they can have kind of like a mid-regular season. But then when it comes to playoffs, they have the confidence to know that they always win. So that's why I think that they always do well. And that's why I give them a lot of credit. A newcomer team can come into a playoff position. Let's say like a Duca can come in with a second place bye and play the winner. I think that would be the 4 and 5 game. And then because of their lack of experience and how the difference and the intense pressure and stuff that comes with playoff games, they might not have the same success as a team that's already done it before. So I always say like that's a huge part of it, and the experience too. We have a couple of guys on our team, for example, that play at Division I schools, but they don't have experience in the league, and experience is huge. I played UPSL in Florida a few years ago too, and there was some younger guys, there was some older guys. There's a good mix, but the biggest thing there is there was a lot of experienced players, and I think that's why the UPSL Florida has always been so strong. Is there's a lot of like ex-pros out there, guys that really want to keep playing, that still train really hard and take things very seriously. But I think for us to really kind of break through is everyone just needs to win the first, second game. But when you're coming to play MLS Next Academies, at that point, those teams aren't necessarily much better, but they're just training way more. They're fitter. They're just quicker. They're sharper. And I think that extra amount of training 2, 3, 4 times a week, it makes a big difference. And I'm saying that because I'm currently doing that with the team I play for in Canada. We train 3 days a week, and then on top of that, potentially a 4th session and then games. So when you're training 3-4 days a week, you're in a much better physical shape. You're a lot sharper. A lot of these UPSL teams, sometimes they train once a week, if that. Like I think
if not, I mean, Chediako, who won it last year, didn't train at all.
So, exactly. So I think that's kind of tricky.
Okay. Well, and again, I asked this question because we see. Again, I've been to national finals. I've seen, Chicago Nation. I've seen AS Frenzy, who won it last year. I've seen these teams. Delphinis out of I believe they were out of Arizona. I've seen these teams, and someone asked, well, how would the UPSL Midwest East do in that? And again, I still just based off, and we've covered a ton of Midwest East games in our lifetime MSN. And I haven't really seen a side other than Detroit United who's really built for that, just based on the makeup of their team, built for a long playoff run. And hey, if I'm mistaken, then prove me wrong, teams out there, because I'm a firm believer, Santiago, that I'm okay if I'm wrong. I'm okay. I mean, I'm just looking at the history, and historically, Detroit United is the one that's in the finals every year, and then they end up making either they don't or they win or they don't. And we saw Hamtramck last year make it out of the East, and they lost to Columbus. A couple of years ago, Detroit United, they beat Lions FC in the round of 32. This is back in 22. They lost to Chicago Nation 5-0 the next game.
Yeah.
Now, is Chicago Nation 5 goals better than Detroit United? Probably not.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Probably not. Right. So
I think Chicago Nation's a similar team to Detroit United in every way.
Their makeup is almost identical. They have a couple younger players, but their makeup is of players upwards of high, their high 20s, older 20s to to low 30s. And that's the makeup of Detroit United. And to be fair, I think if you look at the overall UPSL, that's probably what's going to get you there in most of these cases is a player who's been doing this for 10 years, who's wants that opportunity of glory at the end of the summer that maybe a lot of the younger kids just don't quite get yet, because they're still fighting for a college trophy, or whatever. So to them, it's not as important. And again, the reason why I thought this is important for us to talk about today, Santiago, we could talk about the table all day long. I mean, you can go to the UPSL website and talk about where Detroit United and where where Detroit City is. You can look at matchups. We can talk about that all day long. But I think that the viewer at home wants to know, well, how once you get out of this Midwest East, what's going to happen? And to be fair, there's a big financial component to this that we don't talk a lot about.
Yeah.
For you to go to the next level, right? And now, depending upon how things shake up, a lot of times the league will look at placing, in the middle someplace between Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, right? Kind of right in the middle. But a lot of times teams are having to travel 12, 13, 14 hours to go to a game, right? And then you take that along with there's a hotel expense. You still got to pay your referee fees. I mean, there is some reimbursement from the league, but a lot of it's on the shoulders of these teams. So a lot of these players also, they have jobs. So if the game is on a Sunday or a Friday or Saturday or Sunday or Monday where they're not able to travel, you lose important pieces. All those things are factors in why teams might not be able to be successful after their conference, playoffs.
Yeah. Well, I think too is, like, you're right. I think a lot of teams have to put up the money up front. Like they gotta make all these expenses at the beginning of the season. And I think, at the tail end of the season after they've used up a good chunk of their budget. So I give them a lot of credit, especially like it's great when you get to host, when you're the number, because if you're the number one seed, you're basically the way it works is the highest seed that's left continues to host. So if you're the number one seed and second seeds and third seeds are winning playoffs in other divisions, it's great for you because you're hosting all the way through.
Yeah.
But let's say you're coming in and you surprise everyone, you're the fourth seed and you win the whole playoffs, then you're always away. So you play the winner of Ohio, then you play the winner of the East region, and then you're going all the way to like the way the one team in our division went all the way to Boston for the second round. That's a deep drive. We did that this year, and it's like an 8-9 hour drive from us. So it definitely takes a lot of investment, a lot of support from the community, and I think we've seen a lot of these teams, bring a good community relationship and engagement plan into what they're trying to do. One team that I would give a lot of credit to that for would be Drita. They just, I told you, they held this big Albanian tournament this weekend, and a few of the teams and a lot of the players in our division played in it. They asked us to move one of their games, and we did it because, like, if you look at this event, they had like 1,000 people there watching. Like it was really cool, and the rivalries within the region between like the Dukas, the Dritas, and Detroit United, whatever, like it was kind of all put aside for the greater good of this big tournament that they held. So I think there is the opportunity to really tap into that community. I know a lot of the other teams, like Real Detroit, for example, like really engages with the Latin community out there, and obviously Hamtramck and the Hamtramck area too. So I think the secret to it is connecting with your community, having community outreach programs and partners that can definitely help bring in both revenue and also just viewers and attention to it. And honestly, like, there is an opportunity to make good money at these games. If you're selling tickets, you're taking it seriously. But if a lot of the teams aren't taking it seriously, then that's where you lose the interest of the viewer, right? So that's where I think people get lost in the semantics and the little things. They don't treat it like as serious as it needs to be. And the teams that do, which are your Chicago Nations, the higher, the teams that continue to succeed, those are the ones that have the funds to go later in the season. And it goes to show like you can make good money. We played our women's team played FC Buffalo as an example. And FC Buffalo is USL League 2 team on the men's side. The women's team is easily a top 5 team in our women's conference, UWS, same league past pro plays too. And if you look at our ticket sales from that game alone was like 4 to 5 times any of our men's games. Like we actually had a crowd. Now, granted, that's a local rivalry too, Buffalo-based teams, but we were able to bring in like a good amount of money at the door to the point where we were able to offset our costs for this weekend's 2 games at home from that one game. So if it all takes a little bit of organization, we have like 5-6 people now part of our game day operations, makes a huge difference. And you can see the teams, like you could tell the difference when you're covering them, but the ones that have their team and their stuff organized and send like the pregame packages on time and put together like a timeline for events and when things are going to happen, when the walkouts happen, and really communicate all that stuff are usually the ones that are the most organized, have everything, meticulously prepared for match day, and usually the ones that are going to survive long term.
No, and you're right. I think that there is, and this is not an issue that's just unique to the UPSL. It's an issue to the amateur teams, pre-professional teams all across the country, right? Because, I mean, you can go into USL League 2 and teams aren't playing in stadiums; they're playing in parks, right? So, the reality is it's not a unique thing to this, and I think a lot of teams, probably on some level are trying, to maybe get there, and they struggle because you need bodies, you need people, right? I mean, these teams, they need people. You need interns, you need people who are willing to kind of do blood, sweat, and tears, so to speak, to help make this thing work. And that could be supporters. It could be everything. So I agree with you 100%, that, the teams that tend to make waves are ones that I think if you look at it, historically across these leagues, is ones that have a good youth base, right? So AS Frenzy has a good youth base, means that they're pulling from their local youth clubs, right? And or they have done very, very well within their community of outreach and support, and those things combined just really create a great recipe for long-term success. Where you can, because again, Chicago Nation has been, I think, the quarterfinals a ton, right?
100%.
And a ton. So, and they've gone to the national finals at least 2 or 3 times. And, they're a Midwest team. So what makes them different than a Detroit team? Not much, so it's just a matter of, I think, how you do things. So good key matchups coming up this weekend here, June 1st, June 2nd, Real Detroit, is hosting Detroit City FC. Hamtramck City is hosting Drita. United Stars is hosting Dearborn United. You had mentioned Pass Pro is hosting Detroit United. So that's going to be a good game this weekend. And then FK Olympic Macomb is hosting Duca. And, we look at, again, the table. FK is currently sitting right now 7th in the table. Duca is currently sitting 2nd. And if you're looking to steal some points, this would be the weekend to do it if you're FK Macomb.
Yeah, I think too. Remember we talked to them about them a few weeks ago, and I feel like ever since they kind of slumped a little bit. But at the end of the day, like they have a couple pretty tough games coming up. They play Duca and then Detroit United next week, so those are pretty. And then Drita, so those are like 3 of the top 4 teams like back to back. So it's kind of make or break for them. Like I said, if we look at like the points lost as well, they're not in that terrible spot, because at the end of the day, they beat one of those teams. They dropped to 11 points lost. So then all of a sudden they're kind of level overall. So there is an opportunity there, but you really got to show if they got what it takes this year to be a top 6 team for sure.
No question about that. To learn more about the UPSL,
will be sorry to cut you off. One of the ones that I think will be kind of interesting, I think, is the game of the week, in my opinion, is the Pass Pro Detroit United game on Sunday. I think that game will pretty much, I think that'll decide in my opinion, it should decide the league, because if Detroit United wins that game, they have 2 games left. They'll go up on points again. And I think it would be tough for a lot of the other teams. They'd be relying on a lot of results to really be able to challenge for first place. So I think that'll be a pretty key game going into the last few match weeks. But again, we'll have to see like if that's like a temporary thing, or if that game can, a tie there would best it up for everybody else and give Duca and Dreed all of a sudden an opportunity to get back into the race, right? So.
Yeah, no question about that. But to learn more about the UPSL, head over to the UPSL website. That website is premier.upsl.com. Take a look at all the standings. You can look at the team standings, the whole 9 yards. And hey, we'll be back at this again here next week, talking about all things UPSL Midwest East. Anything you want to add in here before we wrap this one up?
No, like I said, I think this is cool. I'm excited for this weekend, and hopefully we can see some more exciting coverage and results going into the next few weeks, because I think, especially going into the playoffs, I think this is going to get really spicy.
Spicy is the word of the day, along with busy. But either way, we appreciate you stopping by. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like us, and share with your friends and family. And we'll be back here next week with more UPSL Weekly Recap right here on the Michigan Soccer Network.